Hello, I am Alon Burstein, a visiting assistant professor in the Department of Political Science and Israel Institute Fellow at the University of California, Irvine, here bringing you the summary of the last 24 hours of the Israel-Hamas War. It is currently the evening of February 4th, 2024 in the United States, the morning of February 5th, 2024 in the Middle East. Starting with the hostage situation, everyone is still waiting for Hamas to give its response to the initial Paris plan that was developed already several days ago. Today there was a report in the Saudi Al Arabiya network that Hamas is intending to reject the notion that the prisoner exchange key, i.e. how many Palestinian prisoners will be released in exchange for every Israeli hostage, will be the same as the initial truce. The truce that was in November was 3 Palestinian prisoners per each hostage. According to the report in Al Arabiya, Hamas intends to demand a lot more Palestinian prisoners per each hostage. In addition, the Saudi Al-Hadath network reported that Hamas is going to condition accepting the deal on a complete ceasefire. Different reports over the last several days have suggested that Hamas is going to possibly be more flexible and state that it will accept a promise of a ceasefire later if they have international guarantees. This will in fact be something that is delivered after the first phase of the truce. In addition, a source in Hamas told the Palestinian Al-Quds newspaper today that Hamas is going to demand a complete IDF withdrawal and guarantees to an end of the war, while the Al-Aqsa news channel also reported that Hamas is not given an answer yet and is concluding negotiations among all factions of the resistance. According to different reports, Hamas was going to try to give an answer earlier tonight. However, there is still a lot of disagreements between Yahya Sinwar, the leader of Hamas in the Gaza Strip, and Ismail Haniyeh, the leader of Hamas who resides in Qatar, and between the two of them they can't come to an agreement, and thus between them and negotiating with the Palestinian Islamic Jihad, they are still deciding how to respond to the initial deal. Meanwhile, in Israel, there are continuous debates about the hostage deal as well. Prime Minister Netanyahu stated again today in a government meeting what he has been repeatedly stating every day almost publicly since the deal was proposed to the negotiators. He stated, and I quote, "As I emphasized in the expanded cabinet, we will not agree to any deal at any price. A lot is being said in the media that we've agreed to, things that we simply have not. There will not be a stop to the war until we achieve all of our goals. The IDF will not withdraw from the Gaza Strip, and thousands of terrorists will not be released." Reportedly, in the Israeli government, a very heated debate developed as several ministers, primarily from the Likud, started raising their voice and shouting that they are not going to agree to the deal and that Netanyahu has to come up with better terms and present a hard line within Israel. According to a lot of different sources and speculations, this was actually orchestrated by Netanyahu himself, since most of the ministers that were involved in making a lot of noise actually don't know the details of the deal, and Netanyahu was trying to actually present for his own internal political needs a more hardline front that then will possibly be able to be presented to negotiators later on. Meanwhile, the U.S. National Security Council spokesperson Jake Sullivan stated in an ABC interview today that while he cannot say that a deal is right around the corner, since these things take time, the negotiations are proceeding, and they usually unfold fast only at the end. Similarly, in the CBS interview, he also stated that the ball is the Hamas's court, and added that humanitarian situation in the Gaza Strip is at the top of the agenda of Antony Blinken's current visit to the region. In addition, he added, "Palestinians have the right to return to their homes in Gaza. This is very important because among the different leaks, the leader of the Palestinian Islamic Jihad, Ziad Nahallah, and later the leader of Hamas that is part of the external leadership, Ismail Haniyeh, said that as part of their demands in this ongoing negotiations, they are going to demand that Palestinians be allowed to return to their homes in the northern parts of the Gaza Strip." The fact that the U.S. National Security Council spokesperson also stated today that Palestinians have the right to return home may mean that the U.S. may try to apply pressure on Israel to accept those terms if in fact Hamas does demand them. In addition, it was reported today in Israel Channel 13 that the Biden administration is pressuring Israel to accept a 4-month truce, i.e. that will be a truce, 1 day of truce for every hostage that is released. Later, there were reports in the Qatari Al Arabi news agency that said that the United States is trying to, at the same time, convince Hamas that it will be very difficult for Israel to resume the war after 4 months, i.e. trying to convince Hamas that even if Israel does not publicly guarantee that it is going to actually end the war, the fact is, if it accepts a truce for 4 months, it will be very difficult for it to return to the war later on. Moving on to the fighting in the Gaza Strip, there were no rockets and mortars sent from the Gaza Strip in the last 24 hours. In the last 5 days, only yesterday, there was a barrage of rockets sent. The last 5 days have been the quietest since the war began, with the exception of that truce in November. Regarding the fighting in the Gaza Strip, the northern parts of the Gaza Strip, there were reports of ongoing IDF raids with substantial weaponry found. There were also bombings reported from both the air and sea. The IDF is continuing to expand its operations in different parts of Gaza City, specifically in the El Shati refugee camp. Regarding central parts of the Gaza Strip, there were different gun battles reported throughout the different camps in the central parts of the Gaza Strip. However, most of these reports are usually pretty generic. They simply say gun battles within the central camps. Substantial bombardments were reported both in Deir al-Balach as well as in El Bureid refugee camp. According to some reports, at least 19 Palestinians were killed in one raid of bombings in Deir al-Balach. The heart of the fighting continues to be in the southern parts of the Gaza city, specifically in Khan Yunis. In the last 24 hours, the IDF reported that it completed taking over the main outpost of Hamas's Khan Yunis division, El Qadasiyah. According to reports, the outpost included the offices of Muhammad Sinwar, that is a brother of Yahya Sinwar and one of the top leaders of Hamas in the Gaza Strip. The outpost also including substantial training areas, some of which included models of the entrances to different residents and kibbutzim within Israel that were attacked on October 7th, as well as also models of IDF vehicles and instructions on how to attack them. It also included main war rooms and rocket warehouses, as well as many tunnel entrances. The operation to take over the outpost reportedly was accompanied with substantial gun battles, with many outpost walls were also rigged with explosives that were detonated as the IDF was approaching. In addition, very intensive fighting was reported in the western parts of Khan Yunis, specifically in the Al Amal region. The Al Quds brigades, that is the military wing of the Palestinian Islamic Jihad, reported ambushing IDF soldiers in the areas and other areas of western Khan Yunis and fierce gun battles. The IDF also reported that dozens of Hamas infrastructures, tunnels, and weapons manufacturing area were discovered in the Al Amal area and were destroyed. The IDF also reported raiding Hamas's safes and different money-changing offices, confiscating over 3 million new Israeli shekels that were part of Hamas's funding. In addition, it was reported today that the IDF estimates that in Khan Yunis alone, they have mapped already 160 kilometers, that is roughly 100 miles, of tunnels only under the areas of Khan Yunis. In Rafah, the most southern city, there were major bombings reported throughout the day, mostly targeting the areas of eastern Rafah. Some reports stated that a car was attacked. This usually fits a profile of a targeted assassination. No reports were given regarding who was attacked. We'll likely find out more about that tomorrow. In addition to this, the Al Qassam brigades, that is the military wing of Hamas, today published a summary stating in the last few days they have blown up a tunnel shaft with IDF soldiers inside it, captured 4 IDF drones, fired mortars and RPGs at the IDF soldiers across the Gaza Strip, launched rockets at Tel Aviv, attacked soldiers in Gaza City, killing at least 15 IDF soldiers and injuring many. While the report of them killing 15 IDF soldiers is not confirmed anywhere else, and there were not 15 soldiers that were killed in the last several days in the Gaza Strip. A lot of their other reports do match some of the IDF reports regarding the ongoing fighting that is going on in the Gaza Strip. Other news relating to the Gaza Strip. Prime Minister Netanyahu stated today that 17 out of Hamas's 24 brigades in the Gaza Strip have been destroyed, adding that the rest are in the south and in Rafah, and they will be dealt with as well. In addition, Reuters quoted a senior Israeli official stating that the IDF will coordinate any ground operations that it may develop in Rafah with Egypt, stating that it will also find ways to evacuate those internally displaced people in the region to the north. So there's been a lot of questions regarding if the IDF does plan to operate in the town of Rafah, what's going to happen with the fact that well over half, some reports even say 3/4 of the residents of the Gaza Strip have all crammed into refugee camps in the areas of Rafah. In addition, Egypt is extremely concerned about an IDF operation there that will both violate the peace treaty between Israel and Egypt regarding how many soldiers can be along the border, but more importantly to Egypt, will possibly lead to hundreds of thousands of Palestinians trying to flee across the border. This report in Reuters states that Israel is stating that if it does carry out this operation in Rafah, it will not only coordinate with Egypt, but it is going to evacuate a lot of the internally displaced people back either up north or to other areas from which they became internally displaced in the first place. Other news, Asharak al-Awsat published a report today adding information about Hamas's attempt to rebuild its strength in the northern parts of the Gaza Strip, those areas that the IDF has evacuated. According to the reports, Hamas has promised $200 to every Hamas member who takes up a position in northern parts of the Gaza Strip. I would that $200 in the Gaza Strip is quite a lot of money, with the aim of stopping chaos, specifically stopping looting and crime in the abandoned areas. Those areas have been abandoned by all those internally displaced people that have evacuated down south in the Gaza Strip. Photos were also published showing people being marched to the city in what was called a walk of shame, specifically those who were arrested by Hamas that were caught looting either the homes or the stores of different internally displaced people. Importantly, the report also adds that Hamas is activating police units in Rafah and in the refugee camps around Rafah as well, trying to still assert its force, saying that even in the refugee camps, Hamas is still in control and is still the one who is enforcing law and order. Regarding casualties, no IDF soldiers are reported killed in the Gaza Strip in the last 24 hours, leaving the total number of IDF soldiers that were killed in the Gaza Strip since the invasion began on 225. 4 IDF soldiers were reported injured in the Gaza Strip in the last 24 hours. The total number of IDF soldiers injured in the Gaza Strip since the invasion began is now 1,300. The Palestinian Health Ministry in the Gaza Strip is reporting 127 Palestinians were killed in the Gaza Strip in the last 24 hours, bringing the total number of Palestinians killed in the Gaza Strip since the war began to 27,365. A total of 66,630 Palestinians are reported injured in the Gaza Strip, and there are still several thousand buried under the rubble and presumed dead. Moving on to the humanitarian situation in the Gaza Strip, the ongoing situation with UNRWA and its funding continues to worsen. Israel's Bank Leumi today froze UNRWA's bank accounts in Israel, stating that in light of recent developments, there is genuine concern in the bank that the money will be used to fund terrorism. In addition, there were dozens of protesters in Israel today that tried to block the entrance to the port of Ashdod in an attempt to stop humanitarian aid trucks that were unloading goods in the port of Ashdod on their way down to Gaza. Reportedly, several people were arrested. Related to the humanitarian aid trucks, today the economy minister in Israel, Nir Barkat of the Likud party, called on Netanyahu to stop the aid trucks, specifically saying stop the pastries and fuel that are being funneled directly to Hamas. Other news related to the humanitarian situation, the IDF reported that it uncovered a Hamas document in the Gaza Strip showing how to use the chemical compound H2O2, which is used by hospitals, and convert it to produce rocket fuel and explosives. According to the report, Israel is now stating that this is further proof that Hamas is using humanitarian civilian aid for military purposes, and has shown how Hamas has actually used this information in its different rocket manufacturing areas to produce rocket fuel and explosives that were then mounted onto rockets and missiles. Other news, Reuters today published an interview with a Palestinian pediatrician, Saeed Abdul Rahman Maruf, who was released from IDF custody after being arrested in the northern parts of the Gaza Strip and spending 45 days in detention. According to the report, he claimed that he underwent severe mental and physical torture while in Israel, including prolonged handcuffing, denying sleep, starvation, and that he lost 25 kilos, and inhumane conditions. He also added that he was arrested in the El Ahli hospital in the northern parts of Gaza City, and that the arrest came after him and his medical staff were called upon by the IDF to evacuate and move towards the different IDF units. Reuters stated that they approached the IDF several times with questions and to get a response, and got no response. There were no reports made regarding how many trucks entered the Gaza Strip in the last 24 hours. In the last week, ever since the protests started in Kerem Shalom and in Nitzana, there's actually been very few reports regarding how many trucks entered. In only one of the days, there was a report that stated actually that close to 250 trucks entered, which means that is an increase. However, neither the UN, the IDF, Palestinian Red Crescent, or any other organizations are publishing how many aid trucks entered. Moving on to the West Bank, IDF activity was reported throughout various different parts of the West Bank. However, there was very little detail in the last 24 hours. The only report came out said that 14 Palestinians were arrested in different IDF activity throughout the West Bank. Other news related to the West Bank, Yinon Levy, who was one of the 4 Israeli settlers that the U.S. imposed sanctions upon several days ago, reportedly has had his Israeli bank account frozen as well. This was part of the report that came out when the U.S. imposed these sanctions, that due to banking agreements, the fact that their accounts are going to be frozen in the U.S. may also mean their accounts are frozen in Israel. Responding to this, Finance Minister and head of Religious Zionism Party, Bezalel Smotrich, intervened personally and ordered the Israeli bank inspector to look into the legalities of this move, adding that this is persecution. Other MKs from his party also added this is all part of a leftist plot against Israeli settlers. Other news, Canada announced today that it is going to also sanction Israeli settlers, adding that it is going to sanction those who both incite and commit violence in the West Bank, following the move of the United States. This announcement came at the same time as Canada also announced it is going to impose new sanctions against Hamas leaders. Moving on to the northern parts of Israel, southern parts of Lebanon. After yesterday, there were a lot less rockets launched from Lebanon towards Israel. Today, there were substantial escalations. Regarding the launching of rockets and missiles, there were substantial barrages towards the Upper Galilee and other regions. Rockets and anti-tank missiles targeted the areas of Margaliot, Kiryat Shmona, Manara, Mayan Baruch, Metula, Hardov, Tel Chai, Hanita, Yiftach, Ara, and Arab al-Ramshe. Hezbollah claimed that it launched a total of 6 barrages to various different areas, while El Miadin reported that the Amal group, that is another Shiite group that is much smaller but still active in southern Lebanon, claimed responsibility for some of these barrages. Reports are that the barrages also came immediately after the funerals of 6 different Hezbollah operatives that were killed in the last week in different IDF operations in southern Lebanon. Regarding IDF retaliations, the IDF reported that warplanes attacked Hezbollah Operational Command Center and a military compound in the Yarun village, and as well as a Hezbollah lookout post in Marun Aras. IDF also reported that tank units targeted Hezbollah units in the village of Blida. El Miadin stated that artillery fire of the IDF also targeted the areas of El Adaisa and the Kila village, and other networks also reported that the drone attacks were used in the attacks in Blida as well. Other news related to the northern parts of Israel and southern parts of Lebanon: the U.S. Special Envoy to the region, Amos Hochstein, arrived in Israel today and presented details of his diplomatic plan that he is trying to broker between the two countries to the Israeli government. According to reports, the plan includes two phases. In the first, Hezbollah will retreat to the northern parts of Lebanon, allowing Israeli civilians to return to the northern parts of Israel, while at the same time the Lebanese army and UNIFIL will deploy large forces to ensure stability in the southern parts of Lebanon across the border. According to the reports, the second phase will include opening prolonged negotiations between the countries in order to resolve all the border disputes. Specifically, there are 13 different border disputes between Israel and Lebanon, and that as part of these negotiations, the U.S. and international community will develop economic carrots, quote-unquote, for Lebanon in order to facilitate these negotiations. Hochstein reported that he was given a green light from the government of Lebanon and is now asking Israel to give the deal a chance. It is noteworthy that while the government of Lebanon has given this a green light, and Israel may give this a green light, there's no reports that Hezbollah has agreed to this plan. So even if all sides agree that Hezbollah is going to retreat up north in Lebanon and this is going to facilitate the diplomatic situation, Hezbollah itself has stated that it is not going to do that. It is not agreeing to these plans. It didn't respond to this plan specifically, but stated it is not going to retreat up north or stop the war unless Israel agrees to its own terms, like pulling the IDF down south and other things like that. Other news: Hezbollah today announced that 179 operatives have been killed since the war began. In addition, Hezbollah also published a summary today stating that it has carried out 961 operations against Israel since October 7th. These include hitting 56 military vehicles of the IDF, 26 command centers, 2 Iron Dome batteries. It also cited that it has caused over 2,000 casualties in Israel. These numbers are wildly higher than what was reported in Israel. However, that was Hezbollah's report from today. Moving on to the regional developments related mostly to the U.S. retaliation to the attacks that occurred in its outpost in Tower 22. It has already carried out retaliations in Iraq and in Syria and in Yemen yesterday. According to reports, Ahashad al-Sha'abi, which is a coalition of Iranian-affiliated militias, confirmed that in the U.S. attack in Iraq several days ago, Hassan Abbas al-Bagdawi, who is a brigade commander in that organization, was killed. In addition, today, Naji al-Ka'abi, who is one of the leaders of a pro-Iranian militia, Asaib al-Haq, was assassinated in the Misan region of Iraq. According to reports, on the ground he was assassinated in a gun battle. No reports were given regarding who or what organization carried out the assassination. No one took responsibility. However, this does come amidst the U.S. retaliations in the region. Moving on to Yemen, the U.S. Central Command reported an attack in Yemen against 4 different nautical cruise missiles that the Houthis were planning to launch in the last several hours. In addition to this, responding to the U.S. and UK attack yesterday, Houthi spokesperson Muhammad Abdul Salam stated today, and I quote, "It is not easy to destroy our military capabilities. They were rebuilt during years and years of hard war. Our decision to support Gaza is firm and will not be affected by this aggression. Attacks against our country or against Iraq or Syria will increase the hatred towards American presence among the people." Moving on to some of the political and general trends from the last 24 hours, Minister of National Security in Israel and head of the Jewish Power Party, Itamar Ben-Gvir, gave an interview to Wall Street Journal yesterday, in which, among others, he stated, and I quote, "Rather than giving us full support, Biden is busy giving Gaza humanitarian aid and fuel that goes directly to Hamas." He added, "If Trump was in power, the United States would be acting differently." Responding to this, there were many different responses from a variety of different political figures, both in Israel and in the world. Prime Minister Netanyahu specifically stated today in a government meeting, "Israel is a sovereign state. We very much value the support received from the Biden administration since the war broke out. Support in armaments, support in international institutions, sending forces to the regions, and more. This does not mean that we do not have disagreements, but we have always managed to overcome them with measured and firm decisions." He added that he does not need help from his government navigating the relationship with the United States, and that as a sovereign state fighting for its existence and its future, we make decisions on our own, even when we disagree with our American friends. In other words, Netanyahu is trying to state, on the one hand, he's asking his government to not help, but also trying to show his right-wing government that he's still taking a firm stance. There was other political turmoil in Israel. Minister Gantz called on Netanyahu to rein in the Minister Ben-Gvir, and opposition leaders also heavily condemned his statements. And there were also, in addition to this, responses in the United States. Specifically, former President Trump, stated in a Fox interview today, seemingly giving some praise to Netanyahu after that statement from his ministers, he was relating to the assassination the United States carried out of the Iranian head of the Al-Quds force, Qasem Soleimani, in 2020. He added that Israel had a large part in actually planning the assassination, something that was not stated before. However, that Israel pulled out 2 days before, but relating to the actual development of the plans, Trump stated, Bibi played a large part in it specifically. In addition to this, the National Security Advisor in the United States, Jake Sullivan, added today that the U.S. supports a hostage deal that will release hostages, including U.S. citizens, save lives, and allow aid to reach the Palestinian people, adding, this is the top priority for us. The Israeli government can answer if it is a top priority for it. Based on this response, they will also have to give answers to the Israeli people. Other news, the U.S. Senate today put forth a bipartisan budget that includes in it an aid package to Israel of $14.1 billion US dollars, as well as $10 billion US dollars for humanitarian aid that is combined to the Gaza Strip, the West Bank, and Ukraine. Other news, Politico today published a report regarding the support for President Biden leading up to November, stating that a lot of young Democrats are uncomfortable with Biden's support for Israel, or what was specifically called support for Netanyahu's war. The report adds that in private conversation, Biden calls Netanyahu a fucking bad guy, adding that there is fear in the Biden administration that Netanyahu hopes to drag the United States into a regional war that will overshadow the situation in Gaza. The White House denied all of these claims. Other political news, the French foreign minister is due to visit Israel and the West Bank tomorrow as part of a regional trip that will also be to Lebanon, Jordan, and Egypt. Moving on to the future of the Gaza Strip, today Prime Minister Netanyahu again stated, I want to clarify our policy. The most essential step is destroying Hamas. We will not end the war before completing its goals, destroying Hamas, returning our hostages, and ensuring that Gaza is no longer a threat to Israel, i.e., again, repeating the statement that Israel will have to ensure that Gaza is no longer a threat. That is Netanyahu's way in the past of saying it is not going to hand over Gaza to another security establishment. Israel is going to maintain security control. In addition, Finance Minister in Israel, Bezalel Smotrich, was today again asked about his vision for settlements in the Gaza Strip. He stated, and I quote, settlements represent security. We've seen that where there aren't settlements, there's the October 7th massacre. He added that soldiers do not in fact guard settlements, but rather, settlers are the security buffer zone in the Israeli state. In his Wall Street Journal, Itamar Ben-Gvir also again stated that he advocates willful immigration of Palestinians from the Gaza Strip, adding that this is the most humane thing to do since Israel does intend to stay in the Gaza Strip and resume settlement activity. That is my report for the last 24 hours. I'll be back tomorrow.